Way back in 1992, the Amiga computer platform got an exclusive release that, honestly, didn't look like it belonged on the system at first glance. Apidya was a Japanese-style horizontal shoot-'em-up that looked like something you'd expect to find in an arcade, not as an exclusive release for a computer platform. Even weirder, even though the game looked like it was a Japanese-made game, and heck, it even played as one as well, it wasn't developed or created by a Japanese company. It was developed by a company named Studio Kaiko, which, while it did have a Japanese-style name, the studio was actually German, completely made up of German developers. But as peculiar as all of that was, the game itself was actually a very solid game. It's often praised as one of the more playable shooters for the Amiga, one of the best in the genre for the platform. Its gameplay, or at least its core gameplay, is very similar to that type of gameplay found in the Gradius series of games. When you collect flowers that are dropped by enemies, you can cash them in for various power-ups, like speed, bombs, various different types of shots, drones, and shields, a type of system that should seem very familiar to fans of Konami's shoot-'em-up series. It even has the bar down below at the very bottom that looks very similar to that of which that you could find in the Gradius games. It also had a weird premise. The game's story is centered around a young man named Ikaru, whose wife has been poisoned by black magic cast from an evil lord. Ikaru then transforms into a bee of all things, which you, the player, plays as in an attempt to take out the evil lord's minions, as well as to find an antidote for his wife. As far as the visuals go, the game featured some pretty detailed pixel graphics for the time. It looked pretty good. Anyway, over 30 years later, there's a remake coming out called Apidya Special, courtesy of NN Games. Thanks to the publisher, I've had a chance to check out the game this past week, and I got some thoughts on the remake, as well as whether I think it's worth picking up. So, let's dive into it. First off, the remake really leans into that arcade look that I mentioned earlier. Particularly, it seems to have a early SNK Neo Geo style. The new graphics fully embrace that aesthetic while still keeping the spirit of the original game intact. There's also a CRT effect that is turned on by default that attempts to replicate the retro look. You can turn it off if you want a clear image, but honestly, this is one of those rare cases where I actually prefer leaving it on. I think it's a good effect, and it really helps to sell that old school arcade feel. You can also switch between the new graphics and the original visual look of the classic game with just the press of a button at any time. It's kinda neat to see how the game originally looked and then be able to switch right back to the updated version. And of course, as you can tell from the footage, the game can now be played in a widescreen format as opposed to just 4x3. Besides that, you can choose between the new Remake's soundtrack and the original game's soundtrack, with the Remake soundtrack being enabled by default. Both soundtracks were handled by legendary composer Chris Helsbeck, who's probably best known for his work on games like the Turrican series, Star Wars, Rogue Squadron, Giana Sisters, X-Out, and many others. And yes, the soundtrack is absolutely a highlight of the game, especially the new remake arrangements. They sound fantastic. Now, it's important to note that for the most part, the remake retains the same gameplay, the same level design, and mechanics that the classic game had, so there's not much of a deviation in terms of that here. But there are quite a few options in this remake that allow you to customize the gameplay and adjust things that you couldn't do in the 1992 classic. You got difficulty settings of 4 difficulty options, as well as options for setting the number of lives, as well as when you earn 1-ups. Beyond that, there's even more ways to adjust the difficulty. For example, you can choose whether the stage resets when you die. This is enabled by default, just like how it is in the classic game, so when you die, you'll restart either at the beginning of the stage or from a checkpoint. If you opt to turn it off, well, you'll continue right from where you died. You can also choose whether your weapon power gets downgraded when you die. This is enabled by default, similar to, again, the Gradius games, meaning you'll lose some of your weapon power when you die. You turn it off, and you'll keep your power-ups instead when you lose a life. Apidya is a pretty challenging shooter. it's got a nice retro hardcore difficulty. But for those who are maybe not as adept at shooters, disabling those last two options can make things considerably easier. There's an option to automatically select the power-ups as you collect the red flowers. That's enabled by default, but you can turn it off if you rather have more control over which power-ups you want to choose. You can also set the game from 50 FPS to 60 FPS. Now at 60 FPS, the game will run faster. The original game operated at 50 FPS, as the classic game was designed and released for European markets, where 50 FPS, or rather 50 Hz, was standard. Setting it to 60 FPS makes the game run a bit faster, just like you would take any European game of that era, that being the early 1990s, and try to run it on an NTSC console. So yeah, don't go switching this to 60 FPS unless you're ready for their faster tempo. Finally, it's worth noting that there are 3 save slots that will save automatically as you progress through the game. And beyond that, that's pretty much it for what the remake brings to the table. The new graphics, new soundtrack, and new options and settings. So with that said, is this remake worth picking up if you're a shoot-'em-up fan? Well, at the very least, the price is right. At $19.99 USD, it is inexpensive, and if you like Gradius style games or the like, then you'll probably like this. It's fun to play, it's got a good length to it, the game has quite a few stages to play through, including secret stages, and a complete playthrough will take you roughly 40 to 45 minutes to complete. That is if you can reach the end. This one is a toughie. As for myself, I do like the new remake's visual look. It doesn't stray too much from the original's intention. I do like how the remake leans more into the art style of what games inspired it. The big enemies and bosses look more detailed than ever. That said, I do find at certain times, at least in the earlier stages, that some of the bullets and projectiles tend to blend into the background of the remake's visuals. In the classic look, I don't really see that as a problem so much. This is kind of the same sort of problem that kind of reared its head with In-In's R-Type Dimensions 3 release earlier this summer, though here, it's nowhere near as egregious. Beyond that issue, I think this release is solid for what it is. If you like shoot-'em-ups, or if you're a fan of the original game, then I think you will like this. Again, the price is right, it's just $20 USD on digital storefronts, including the eShop. Let me know if you plan to pick it up, as well as for those watching who have played the original game, feel free to share your thoughts down below. As someone who didn't have an Amiga growing up, I always like to hear people's thoughts and experiences of those who did have one growing up. If you appreciate the video, make sure to give this video a like. It does help this video out, as well as the channel. And if you're new here, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you do not miss out on any future videos. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you on the next one.